Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with you on this Tuesday, the 8th of January. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information. You can always find that online, no matter what's going on. 1-800-472-0391 is your Alaska weather information line, and that is still up and running. Weather.gov/Alaska is still up and running as well. The 24-hour, 7-day-a-week forecast available to you with just a click of the button. You can get to information from the National Weather Service for your what we call public forecast. That means where you live. You can also get your marine weather forecasts there, information on any tsunamis that may be occurring or earthquakes around the area. And certainly find information about river flow or ice on some of the rivers and ice thickness around the area, as well as recent snowfall amounts in the mountains. That's at the APRFC, the Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center, has that information and manages the hydrology of Alaska, also Hawaii too, if you want to check that out. And you can get your general aviation weather information as well from the links on the screen there. Just take a click and off you go. If you can't find what you're looking for, I always encourage you, send me an email. Now, the trouble with that right now is I may not be able to respond if it's not super critical, but I'd be happy to get back to you just as soon as I possibly can and am allowed to. david.snyder@noaa.gov, and we'll see you there. Now, on with the show. This is it. As we look at southeast, we have active weather moving through. A pretty decent storm moving through the central and eastern Gulf of Alaska right now. As this gets a little bit closer, it's going to send a little more moisture northward. Right now, we already have enough wind moving through the region that we are looking at a high wind warning for Juneau. That's going to continue for winds over 60 miles an hour. That can last till about 9 o'clock tonight. A wind chill advisory is posted for the Tai Inlet and the Klondike Highway as well. Those wind chill values there about 50 to 55 below at least. And again, the winds should gradually improve as we head toward tomorrow morning, but it'll last until about 6 o'clock. So if you are traveling outbound or have friends coming in to the Klondike Highway area, make sure they've got a little bit of extra gear just in case something happens and they have to park it alongside of the road for just a little bit of time. Always better safe than sorry. As we look a little bit further south, the areas added in yellow, including Craig, Ketchikan, Klawock, Metlakatla, as well as Petersburg and Wrangell. And Cake, I think we're dealing with a little bit more snow as we get into tonight, overnight hours from about midnight to 3 o'clock in the morning. This will start to spin up, and we're looking at about 2 to 5 inches of snow for some of the northern areas, and for some areas, for the southern areas, 2 to 5 inches, and for some of the more northern areas shaded in yellow here, looking at as much as 4 to 9 inches of snow. So winter weather advisories posted for you. This probably isn't heavy enough that you need to go off and shovel the boat if it snows a little bit overnight. But if we get a significant amount of snow in a very short amount of time, you might want to keep an eye on that there. So certainly some snow and winter weather advisories tell us that that's a preliminary caution. Let's keep our eyes on this winter weather as it moves into your region tonight and into the early morning hours. Now, look up north also has wind chill advisories for parts of the Chukchi coast. Again, wind chill values there could drop around 55 to 60 below in some cases, so pretty nasty cold kind of stuff. And it looks like it's going to linger. But at least this advisory will take us till about 9 o'clock in the morning before we see a little bit of improvement, or if it's not going to go away, we'll reissue that advisory there. But the overall picture for the north is this. There is going to be some easing of the cold in the interior and central and east, probably as we head toward the end of the week. But overall, for the north, it looks like cold is going to be really cold and probably stick around at least through the end of the week and early next week. So a big significant area of deep winter cold is not going anywhere for the north. So what you see is what you get. Get used to being cold up in the north. And yeah, sorry, that's not the great news if you don't like the 40 to 50 below kind of weather in some cases. It is going to be pretty cold. Here's the big weather picture as we look at it as we get into Tuesday and into early Wednesday here. The big pattern is that low pressure is working its way across the Gulf. You can see the storm that's working its way up towards southeast right now. Fairly decent area of low pressure across the Pacific Northwest, and a lot of this moisture is working its way up into southern parts of Southeast already. So that's that new cloud deck that you see coming in from the south, already passing Ketchikan and Annette and working its way towards Sitka fairly carefully. Another big wave of low pressure is organizing out across the North Pacific, though, and that's kind of the game changer as we move toward the end of the week. Right now, it's slated to move into the North Pacific by Thursday at around 943 millibars, which is pretty impressive. It is going to be one heck of a winter storm. Southerly's already building in ahead of that, and high pressure, as we know, when we get into this really big kind of cold situation, it is not ready to move out of the way anytime soon. So as we have this huge ridge of high pressure sitting across the west, it's rough, tough, and hard to bluff. It's not moving, despite the strong southerly winds moving over it. A lot more likely that a lot of this warm air will move up over that colder air than able to actually push it out of the way. So we'll have to really do a lot of work to get that moving. In the meantime, you can see one wave of low pressure out across the Bering right now. It is creating snow out across the Yukon Delta into Norton Sound. Generally just south of Deering and Nome and all the way out towards St. Lawrence Island and St. Matthew Island. There is snow and probably some poor visibility with that as well. But the big cold is right here from high pressure. It stinks all the way into the central and eastern interior. Temperatures came up just a little bit around Fairbanks during the midday hours there, and also saw temps going up and down quite a bit around south central. You get into a little bit of clearing, the temperatures drop through the floor. A little bit more cloud cover, temperatures come back up a little bit. So cloud cover is making a huge difference on the type of weather you're seeing if you're in this cold pattern right now. Low pressure sitting just east and north of Kodiak, 1,015 millibars there, and another low again across the Pacific Northwest. This one's kind of moving northward towards southeast. A little bit of snow out around Petersburg and the central parts of the Panhandle, but a little bit more wind around Juneau and the Klondike Highway as a result of this high pressure difference and the low pressure to the south. Always trying to equalize that out, and that difference is what's making it so windy right now. As that changes a little bit through the rest of tonight, we'll continue to see wind across northern and central parts of southeast as we go. So again, those high wind warnings expected to take us at least until 9 o'clock for the Juneau area right now. High pressure sitting across the Yukon, 1,033 millibars. Got a trough separating that all the way down the western spine of the Alaska Range, maybe just a little bit west of that, in fact, and areas of low pressure and a little bit of snow falling along that boundary. Fairly light at this point. Out to the west, low pressures across the western Bering, just east of the Kamchatka Peninsula at 982 millibars, and everything that you see on the north side of that boundary is that big cold. So you think it's cold in south central? No. This is the big cold's up here. We'll take a look at the temperatures in a minute. As we get into Wednesday, high pressure is anchored across the Beaufort Seacoast, 1,034 millibars there. You can see the low working up the outer coast of southeast, 984 millibars, that front squeezing that moisture right into the terrain of southeast. And once again, with that, we expect to see as much as 5 to 9 inches of snow across the southern parts of southeast. A little bit further north, probably talking about 2 to 5 inches of snow. So a little bit of a change there. And again, all due to that rapidly intensifying storm that's moving its way up the eastern Gulf. A little bit of light snow continues around the Alaska Range, and then we'll see pockets of rain and snow showers from the Alaska Peninsula, probably some snow showers around the southern Cook Inlet region to Kodiak Island and Prince William Sound, and now you're getting a hint of that next wave. As that comes in quickly to the western Aleutians, 943 millibars, we're going to see a sharp a sharp southerly wind for the central Aleutians as we go into your Thursday there. Easy for me to say. The big cold still evident here across western Alaska. You can see the leading edge of that right here marked by the frontal boundary. And not a whole lot going on under that except for cold. And there will be a little bit of wind across the northwestern areas there, so wind chill advisories may still be an issue, telling us that just a short amount of time outside could be very dangerous if you're not taking super extra precautions. Watch for some areas of light snow across the east and northeastern parts of the state, but for south central, generally dry weather. As this moves in, as we head toward the weekend, there might be an opportunity for some brief and light snowfall, but again, this area is really dry, so a lot's going to have to happen to make that be overcome and moisten up enough to produce snowfall. Now let's take a look at your temperatures for tonight. Looks like temps in the central interior probably anywhere from 15 to 20 below, anywhere from 30 to 40 below for Eagle down toward Northway, probably colder around Fort Yukon as well, 33 below around Arctic Village, and anywhere from 20 to about 40 below across the North Slope, not factoring in the wind chill, 10 below around Nome, Teens and 20s for the Bristol Bay region, looking at ice offshore as well. That's improved greatly. And low to mid 30s for the Alaska Peninsula, 28 in Kodiak. And for southeast, generally in the mid to upper 20s for most in the Panhandle. Haines and Skagway in the teens, as well as Yakutat, looking at colder weather there. As we get into Wednesday afternoon, you'll see temps in the 20 to about 35 below range for the North Slope, around 22 below for Bettles. Temps around 5 to 10 below for Fairbanks, so warming up a little bit. Teens and 20s for South Central. Southeast in the 20s, 30s as you get into some of that warmer, wetter, cloudier air. Bristol Bay temps below freezing, 13 around Nunivak Island, 35 in St. Paul. Sand Point, you're looking at temperatures closer to 37 for your Wednesday.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
On to your aviation weather now. With low pressure building across the northern Pacific, we're seeing a steady flow of southerly winds bring up moisture into the Bering Sea, which is fairly cold, and certainly to the south, fairly open at this point. You'll look for IFR conditions between St. Matthew, Nunivak Island, and east of the Pribilofs in the morning, and also another swath just to the west. Look for IFR conditions moving into the Kenai Fjords region, as well as the southern parts of the Panhandle around the Misty Fjords region and the Dixon Entrance, up north around the Beaufort Seacoast, and then west and along the northwestern parts of the Alaska Range. They're generally northwest of Rainy Pass and Lake Clark and Merrill Pass. You'll see that shifting northward a little bit more toward Windy and Isabel Pass tomorrow. MVFR conditions stretching up toward Eagle. Look for IFR across the central and eastern Beaufort Seacoast to continue for Wednesday afternoon, and also across the eastern and central Bering Sea from St. Matthew down to the Pribilofs and into parts of Bristol Bay. Looking for IFR to continue across the southern Panhandle. Most of the central and northern parts, including the northern Gulf, should remain VFR. As we get into your Thursday afternoon, look for VFR conditions across most of the Copper River Valley, the Kenai Peninsula, as well as parts of the Anchorage Bowl, looking at MVFR, that generally north of the Alaska Range as well, into the central and eastern interior, and the Beaufort Seacoast under IFR conditions. St. Matthew down toward the Pribilofs remains IFR through Thursday morning. And look for IFR to increase and expand northward through the northern parts of the Panhandle as we get into Thursday afternoon, and even further north still for Thursday during the day. MVFR conditions still fairly spotty across the northern Gulf, a little bit of improvement across south central and southwest, but IFR lingers across the Pribilofs, St. Matthew, St. Paul, and St. George there. Looking at some changing conditions, St. Matthew may be the first to see some improvements there, while the central and western chain starts to build in with more IFR. Here's your pass conditions. Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass, looking for MVFR conditions pretty much all day long tomorrow. Looking for IFR as we start out Lake Clark and Merrill Pass as we go through your Wednesday. Rainy Pass, marginal conditions most of the day. Windy Pass looking for VFR, and then some worsening toward marginal conditions as we go into Wednesday there. Isabel Pass looks to be VFR, and the same goes for the further east. Mentasta, VFR there. It's going to be pretty cold there again as we head into the Copper River Valley. Tanita Pass looking for VFR conditions most of the day. Portage Pass looking good. Chilkoot and White Pass, one more day of A-OK, and then after that, IFR builds in. Freezing levels show that surface freezing line is starting to nudge northward again with that southerly wind developing, but certainly very cold all the way from the Gulf Coast northward. 2,000 and 4,000 foot freezing lines in view around the Dixon Entrance and down toward Haida Gwaii. Icing potential is a little bit higher up though for southeast. Most areas are looking at about 7,000 to 8,000 feet and higher before you get into any significant icing risk. We're going to call that isolated moderate for now. Same goes around the Eagle all the way down into the western Alaska Range, generally above 1,000 foot here to get into some of that moisture, and then below 8,000 feet as you move further westward. So you can see the changing elevations there, and also across the Alaska Peninsula out toward the eastern chain, generally above 6,000 feet for isolated moderate there. Here's a jet stream and a huge trough carved out across the Gulf of Alaska right now. Wind speeds on the eastern side of that coming in around 70 knots, more of a southeasterly flow coming up through southeastern Alaska, and then a strong ridge across the North Pac right now. Wind speeds on the western side of the low, though, 100 to about 130 knots, and then southerlies working their way northward into the eastern parts of Asia around high pressure, 55 knots, and then the next big wave coming in here just east of the Kamchatka Peninsula. As we look at 9,000 feet, you can see that extreme ridge of high pressure here across the northern Bering. That is keeping that cold funneling in across most of the mainland now, a northerly wind over the Arctic coast and down into areas Across the western interior, over the Alaska Range, the winds slow down a little bit, and we've got general southerly winds across southeastern Alaska. Southerly winds also building across the western Bering Sea at 3,000 feet. Again, fairly calm conditions across most of the central and western interior. Not exactly calm, but generally light winds for most areas, anywhere from 5 to about 15 knots. A little bit of a stronger north and northeasterly flow for the Chukchi coast. Again, all surrounding that eastern side of that ridge of high pressure that's pushing in that cold across many areas here. Out across the west, southerlies building in up to about 75 knots for the western chain. And for southeast and the eastern Gulf, wind speeds there pick up a little bit more out across the open water, but for most areas over land, you're looking at about 5 to 10 knots or so. Let's take a look at turbulence, and what you'll see is pretty hit and miss kind of stuff here. Generally across the Chukchi coast and parts of Kotzebue Sound, below 4,000 feet, there could be some considerable moderate there. Also looking for a few hot spots here across southern parts of southeast and up toward Icy Cape and Cape Fairweather, some considerable moderate below 4,000 feet. And watch for developing areas of turbulence in the west. Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm Dave Snider, and joining me again is Cindy Preller. She's the Tsunami Program Manager for Alaska Region's National Weather Service. Thanks again for joining us, Cindy.
Thanks for having me back, Dave.
Sure thing. And I love saying Tsunami Program Manager for Alaska's National Weather Service because that's not weather. Why is the Tsunami Program part of the National Weather Service?
Well, it's because the Weather Service absolutely rocks at warning people for every kind of, devastating natural hazard.
Mm-hmm. The mission of the Weather Service is to protect life and property. And so how does the Tsunami Warning Center in Palmer, Alaska, which is a very unique office, again, within the Weather Service, it's not weather, how do those folks help us protect life and property?
The National Tsunami Warning Center in Palmer is a national warning center, and we analyze seismic traces 24/7 all around the world. So when there's an earthquake anywhere on the planet, we see it and analyze it within minutes.
Within minutes, and there's actually a goal to have it under, was it 5 minutes?
If there is a tsunami warning to be issued for continental America, yeah, we must get that out, or shoot to get that out in 5 minutes.
Okay. Now that's not something I have ever learned to do, so I know it would be a struggle for me to do that under probably hours, but it is fascinating to watch, and the office is open on a regular basis for tours, right?
Absolutely. Come by Friday.
Okay.
Yep, every Friday at 1, 2, and 3 p.m. They're open public free tours. And it's the most interesting place on the planet. You really should check it out.
Okay, and the office team is made up of people that are earth scientists, not meteorologists or atmospheric scientists. Talk about some of the types of people that work there.
Right, we are out of place in our National Weather Service, but yeah, we are geologists, geophysicists, oceanographers. We even have an astrophysicist on board, computer software architects, electronic technicians that are brilliant and innovative. Our software is all written in-house. Our instrumentation is designed in-house. So it's a really, really unique place, and it's just a couple handfuls of people that work there. So
sure,
yeah.
One of my favorite ways to get a tsunami alert message is on Twitter.
Right.
And I can follow the Twitter address, and we'll put that up on the screen for you there. But it's usually a very quick message that tells you initially what the magnitude of an earthquake could be and about where its epicenter was. What are some of the other ways that you can get that alert message?
Well, Twitter's my favorite too.
Yeah.
And you don't even need a Twitter account to receive it. So
That's
it just comes in like an SMS message. But you can also receive it via email, weather radio, of course, the crawler on your television screen, on the internet, Google Alerts.
Right.
Marine radio if you're out in harbors and boats. Actually, marine radio is probably,
yeah, it is a good one.
That's our partnership with the Coast Guard. We're really grateful for that, absolutely. But there's a variety of ways in dissemination.
Okay.
And locally, excuse me, I'm sorry, but locally in the communities, the sirens will go off as well.
Right. So lots of different ways to get that very important message very quickly when that matters to you. One of the ways that the Warning Center practices with communities is a test on a yearly basis, right?
Right.
How does that work?
Thanks for bringing that up. It's a controversial issue, but it's super important to help us warn better and really serve Alaskans. So the week of March 27th, the commemoration of the 1964 event, for that week we have a Tsunami Preparedness Week every year, we like communities to get out and do drills and practice and do everything we can to raise awareness. And part of that is a live code test where we actually issue the warning message live and we activate the emergency alert system, which means sirens go off, the TV crawler happens, and it's a test.
We're doing everything that would normally happen without the real threat of the tsunami, just to practice as much as possible.
Right, and this is a major partnership with the State of Alaska, Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management, the Emergency Operations Center, and the Alaska Broadcasters Association. Without the media, we wouldn't be able to do this. So the three groups really work tightly together to do our best to warn, educate the public that this is happening so they don't wonder and get scared about it. It has been remarkable what we've learned. I mean, it pretty much breaks somewhere every time, but then we fix it and it gets better. So a quick example is just a few years ago, we used to, when we issued a message, it would activate the entire state. Right? I mean, Kotzebue, Nome, Bethel, everybody would be in tsunami warning. And so now we can regionalize it to where the actual event is taking place. That's pretty huge.
Right. So identifying points of failure and also points of success and making sure we continue down that successful path so that folks are warned as quickly and accurately as possible.
Absolutely. And, you know, to get our communities involved to prep themselves, prep their businesses, prep their tourism, prep their schools, you know, just make this an annual thing they need to be doing.
Right. So as citizens wanting to be prepared, we should be prepared to learn more about that test that's happening usually toward the end of March every year.
Right, and you should be happy that it's happening.
Right.
Instead of upset. Definitely be happy that it's happening.
Right. Just as we test tornado sirens in tornado country, we also have to test the tsunami program as well.
Right, because there isn't enough time. You know, for a local tsunami, the wave will arrive in less than 2 minutes. So it's super important that people know what to do.
Very good. Well, Cindy, thank you so much for helping us know more about the Tsunami Ready program and the test, and the Tsunami Warning Center is a very unique and very important job in the National Weather Service that is just fascinating to me every time I visit the office. So.
It's the only one for the continent. You really should come check it out.
It's an international effort.
Yes.
Wonderful stuff. Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you, Dave.
And thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm Dave Snider. We'll see you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
And onto your sea ice edge update, you'll notice that I've got a lot of high concentration ice all the way from the Kuskokwim Delta all the way to well south of St. Lawrence Island. The ice edge here is about 65 to 70 nautical miles northeast of St. Matthew Island. The marginal ice zone is about 60 to 65 nautical miles north and east. So that is closing in. And with continued areas of offshore air, cold air blowing off the continent, we will continue to see some ice growth further and further south along this boundary. And more ice has been added into the Bristol Bay region. You'll also notice a discerning eye here across northern parts of Cook Inlet. More ice growth there that is in that 80% concentration or higher. And we'll continue to see that as long as the cold air lasts, but there is some changes later in the week that could bring in some warmer weather to the region. In the meantime, a lot of wind moving through southeast. You're looking at sustained winds across the northern parts of Lynn Canal at 55 knots with a 12-foot sea, gust to 50 knots across Stevens Passage, 35 knots sustained with 7 to 4-foot seas as you head further southward, so diminishing there in strength and in sea height. Offshore winds continue across the outer coast. Some strong gusts coming out of Stevens Passage there. Not only are you talking about wind chill advisories for some areas in the north, but you're talking about just some generally strong winds as well, and snow building into the central and southern parts of southeast overnight and into midday tomorrow. For Thursday, the winds settle down just a little bit, 25 to 35 knots. You're looking at about 7 to 8-foot seas across the inside waters and 10 to 12-foot seas across the outer coast, 20 to 25 sustained, a little bit less wind the further north you go toward Prince William Sound. And in the Sound tomorrow, northerlies 20 knots, 3-foot seas, gust to 40 coming out of the Copper River Delta region. Northwesterlies also coming out of Resurrection Bay, a little bit stronger there. You can see that seas may come up a little bit more sharply just outside of that bay. Anywhere from 6 to 7 foot seas expected there, and 2 to 7 foot seas coming down Cook Inlet, 10 to 25 knots through your Wednesday. For Thursday, winds pick up just a little bit more across the Barren Islands region, 25 to 30 knots, and 9 foot seas expected. 20 to 25 in the northern Gulf into Prince William Sound, 4 to 8 foot seas there for your Thursday. For the Bristol Bay region, northeasterlies over the ice, 4 foot seas there in the open waters, 6 foot seas a little bit further down the coast with a 15 knot wind, 15 to 20 across the Shelikof Strait, Kodiak Island region, and down the Pacific coast, 11 to 13 foot seas for Wednesday. Winds will start to pick up a little bit more in response to a building area of low pressure out in the west. You'll see more of that in the Aleutians. 25 knots across the Bering, 5 to 7 foot seas there, and 5 to 11 foot seas across the North Pacific, looking for 20 to 25 for your Thursday, generally out of the north and northwest. Now, an easy day on Wednesday for the chain, looking for 15 to 20 knots, anywhere from 7 to 11 foot seas across the central and eastern parts. More of a northeasterly flow for Unalaska and Dutch Harbor down in Nikolsky, and a building southwest wind across the west. Now, this should be a sign of a day to prepare, because as we get into Thursday, much stronger winds coming into the central and western chain. Be prepared for rapidly intensifying winds throughout the nighttime hours and into the day for Thursday, with 40 to 55 knots and seas building to 30 to 33 feet all the way from Shemya and Attu to Kiska and out toward Adak. And just south of Adak and Atka, the Pacific coast looking at 32 feet. As you move eastward, though, anywhere from 12 to 17 foot seas there on that 35 to 40 knot wind. So this will be moving eastward. So as we get into Friday, watch for that wind to build in across the central and eastern chain. Offshore winds continue for the west coast, looking at 20 to 35 knots across the region, most of that over the ice. As you get out towards St. Matthew, 25 knots from the south and east, 12 foot seas there, easterlies over the Pribilofs, 15 knots and 9 foot seas, looking for 30 knots and 10 foot seas there on Thursday, and building wind and seas across the St. Matthew region, and look for even higher seas as you move west. As we get into that blue range, we're talking about 15 to 17 foot seas in some cases there, so feel free to pass that on to all the crabbers and boats out there in the water. Thank you so much for doing that. Out across the Beaufort Sea, 10 knots across the water there. You're looking at about 15 to 20, 25 even as you get into the Kotzebue Sound region. Of course, some building ice across the area, which is good news. North and easterlies there on Wednesday, and really a similar pattern as we get into Thursday. 15 to 20 knots for most areas around Kotzebue Sound and the Bering Strait. Looking a little bit stronger south of Wales, though. 25 knots heading toward St. Lawrence Island, 15 knots across the Beaufort Sea. Again, all ice covered. As we look at the weather maps one more time, winter weather advisories across the central and southern parts of southeast. That could mean as much as 4 to 9 inches of snow for places like Cake and Wrangell and down toward Petersburg. A little bit further north, a little bit less snow as we go. Also looking for wind chill advisories around the Chukchi seacoast. That could mean values of 55 to 60 below in some cases. That'll continue through tonight and into tomorrow. High wind warnings there for the Juneau region until about 9 o'clock tonight. Look for gradual improvement as we go through your day. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather. See you tomorrow.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.